the ninja. Put me down for $20 against the ninja. Hello, this is John Keeper 9600. It's been a while since my last film review, but we decided to go ahead and plunge in with the first film I've actually seen in a couple of months, the LEGO Ninjago Movie, which is the third entry in the LEGO cinematic universe. Yes, that is a thing now. We live in a world where that is a thing. What a blessed world it is. Anyway, so, Ninjago Movie. I haven't really talked about Ninjago a whole lot on my channel, but I am kind of a fan of the series, sort of. For those of you who don't know, Ninjago is a LEGO property, an original property, not based off something else, unlike their Star Wars or Harry Potter or even their Batman lines, that came out in 2011 with a cartoon tie-in. This cartoon aired on Cartoon Network and was supposed to go for 2 seasons before stopping, but the 8th season is airing this year, so we can probably guess how that's going to go. Ninjago is a smash hit with the kids, and even to this day, the sets sell like hotcakes. I've seen the Rotten Tomatoes score for this movie, and the general critic consensus is that it's not as good as the last 2 films, and a lot of critics are giving it thumbs down because it's not as good as the last 2 LEGO films. But honestly, I'm not here to talk about their opinion. I'm here to talk about my opinion. And honestly, truthfully, I like this movie a lot. I do. I really do. I mean that. But that comes with another asterisk, in that I do acknowledge that this movie has flaws. Some of them pretty big, but I'll get to that when I get to that. So, for those of you who don't know the story of Ninjago, it's basically an episodic series where, like, each season has its own kind of concentrated arc, based on whatever play sets are coming out, obviously. And the basic setup is that there are a group of young ninja who each correspond to an element and a color. So there's like a red fire ninja, and a white ice ninja, and a black earth ninja, and so on. The green ninja is supposed to be the most powerful and the leader of them all. And together the ninjas use their powers and a collection of mechas and weaponry to defeat the forces of evil, which come in many shapes and sizes. This movie decides to focus on the sort of main villain of the first 2 seasons, Lord Garmadon. And because of that, you could probably guess that this movie doesn't actually tie into the canon of the show. It's supposed to be a fresh intro for people who have never seen Ninjago, but still be accessible to the fans, I guess. As far as an entry into Ninjago goes, probably starting off with the show would be better, but I feel like there are a lot of parents who are being dragged by their kids to see this. So, it's not really going to be the entry point to get new people in the franchise. Well, maybe it will be. Look, I'm getting ahead of myself. So how does this movie start? Well, that's one of the weirder parts of it. The first LEGO movie, spoilers for if you haven't seen it, but it has a live action segment, right? This film starts off with a live action segment. Yeah, this little kid who is not Finn from the first movie wanders into this, curio shop owned by Jackie Chan. Ninjago! I know that Jackie Chan is actually, plays a major role in the movie. Plus, he did the fight choreography for the film, which is awesome. But I was not expecting to see him in person within the first 2 minutes of the film. For a minute, I kind of had that uncomfortable feeling, sort of like I had at the beginning of, Transformers The Last Night. Like, am I in the right fucking movie right now? I came in for Ninjago, the cartoon minifigs, right? Like, what is this, D-War shit? But actually, it's kind of clever. Like, even though this is a live-action Asian curio shop with all kinds of, weaponry and, if I say Asian curio shop, you kind of know what this place looks like. But it has, this color scheme where, there's, spots of color that correspond to the ninja's color. So there's, a bright red area and a bright, green areas and, bright blue, and they're, scattered all about. So even though it's a dark space, you can see that it's color-coordinated. There's even, a gray fish tank for the water ninja, who for some reason doesn't have a color of her own. Probably because she's a girl. But whatever. So this kid walks into this space, And Jackie Chan proceeds to tell him a story. And this is the framing device for the movie, is Jackie Chan basically tells him the story that is the movie. This framing device is weird and doesn't make sense for a few reasons. First of all, in the first two movies, it's never outright stated in the Lego Batman movie, but it is implied that the story in the film is one that's being acted out by a kid playing with a Lego playset. But in this version, it's just Jackie Chan telling the kid a story. So he has minifigs in his hands, but he only has like the one for Lloyd, who is the main character, and the one for Wu, who is the character that he voices. And for some reason, the Wu figurine that he has is made of wood. Like, completely. Like, it's not painted or anything, it's just a wooden minifig. Like, what? Like, the Lego company's been around for a long time, but it hasn't been around for that long. Like, what are you implying here? That you have a ancient-looking minifig of the character that you voice? Like, I don't get it. Like, what exactly is Jackie Chan's connection to, like, Lego Miniverse? The Lloyd figurine belongs to the kid, but why does Jackie know more about it than the kid does? And, is, Sensei Wu supposed to be Jackie's proxy in the Lego world, sort of like Lord Business was for Will Ferrell in the first movie? Like, they don't say that. That's one of the things that makes sense, but you have to kind of come up with that on your own. I don't know. There's, like, a whole lot about this setup that confuses me, but I think this confusing beginning kind of ties into one of the flaws of the Ninjago movie. The first act is the worst. And I suppose it's better than a movie starting off great and then getting sucky as it goes on. But having a strong beginning is important. And, this film, it feels like it sputters for a bit before it catches its stride. So basically, we're introduced to Lloyd, who is not only our main hero, but also the son of the movie's villain, a four-armed freak named Garmadon, who wants to conquer the city of Ninjago, which is on the island continent of Ninjago. I guess there are only so many names to go around, because of reasons. The film actually opens with Lloyd's 16th birthday. And all of this exposition I just told you, that Lloyd is Garmadon's son, that Garmadon routinely attacks the city, and that it's Lloyd's birthday. No, I said that first. Well, whatever. And that there are a group of ninja that routinely stop Garmadon is all covered by a news segment at the beginning. Like, literally. And what makes this news segment weird is that, first of all, it was done in such a way that I thought maybe it was going to tie into, the news broadcast and, the Lego movie where they cut to Where Are My Pants? But there's no tie-in at all. So, that's weird. But also, this news segment is the most heavy-handed way to possibly deliver exposition because it has two people directly facing the screen telling them stuff that they need to know for the movie to make sense. But they're presumably broadcasting this to people who live in the city. And what's even weirder is that they deliver a report on Garmadon attacking the city before Garmadon has attacked the city. Literally. They, give it like it's a weather broadcast. There's a 95% chance, this is an actual quote from the film, a 95% chance that Garmadon will attack that day. And they recommend that everybody stay indoors. It's wow. Not only are you just telling us who the villain is, but, you're showing us footage of him doing bad things and blowing up the city before he's actually done that. It makes no sense. And, they actually cover all the birthdays in the town before getting to Lloyd's. It's why is this being covered on a news segment? What is... maybe this is intended to be some kind of social commentary with the newscasters very cheerily reporting doom and gloom and even reporting on disasters before they actually happen. That seems relevant to our times, but at the same time, it seems kind of relevant to the sort of tropes that people used to make fun of newscasters for decades. We welcome our new ant overlords and such. So that's weird. But basically, so this movie is basically split into one plot, which is the first act, and then the next two acts are basically the rest of the plot. It feels very disjointed. Basically, it opens up with Lloyd and the other ninja, basically defeating Garmadon, but they end up, fucking it up. So then they have to go on this perilous journey, through the woods to fix what they fucked up. And their daily routine of fighting Garmadon and being praised as heroes before they fuck up and then have to go on this journey to fix it. The point up to that, it feels like it takes too long. Like, this movie's first act is not only clumsy, it's also too long. I don't know if I should get into detail on how it happens because I know a lot of people don't want to be spoiled for this movie. But my review style in general is just spoil movies that I talk about, so fuck it. Basically, Lloyd is hung up because turns out an evil overlord with 4 arms, sharp pointy teeth, and red glowing eyes is not the best dad. Lloyd desperately wishes to connect with Garmadon, which is demonstrated in an admittedly funny scene where Garmadon accidentally butt dials Lloyd on the morning of his birthday. And it's a complete coincidence that Garmadon calls Lloyd. Like, in the trailers, you've probably seen the scene where, like, his phone starts ringing and, like, the caller ID displays his dad's picture. However, in this version, when his dad calls him, like in the actual film version, it just says unknown number. So Lloyd answers it not knowing who it's going to be, and it turns out it's his dad who accidentally FaceTimed him. This gets me into one of the movie's positive points, and maybe its best point. Justin Theroux, who voices Garmadon, he's, I don't know what else he's been in, but one of the main things I know him from is he was is the main character of The Leftovers, which is a pretty serious show made by the creators of Lost. Garmadon is the funniest part of this movie, and Justin Theroux totally steals the show anytime he's on screen. He has the best lines, he has the best delivery, he has the most personality, he's an amazing sort of villain. So basically, when if you've seen the trailers, you know how the scene goes. When Lloyd answers the phone, Garmadon says, "Who is this?" Lloyd reminds him that it's his kid, and Garmadon says that he must have butt dialed him and blows him off. But what makes it funnier is that in the actual, like, movie, Garmadon is, like, clearly in the middle of breakfast, and so you hear, like, all these food sounds before Garmadon says, like, "Who is this?" like, sleepily in, like, his, like, pajamas with the little volcanoes on them. That's cute. Lloyd's like, "Dad, it's me, it's your son." And Garmadon says, "You're not my son. My son is totally bald and has no teeth." And Lloyd is like, "That was 16 years ago, Dad. I'm not a baby anymore." Like, that line made me laugh really hard. It was the first line that actually made me laugh in the movie, even though the movie was, like, trying to be goofy in, like, that kind of self-conscious way that I've talked about before in early reviews. Like, when it seems like a movie is trying to get a laugh. Just the dismissive way he delivered that line when he said, "My son is totally bald." Like, when he started to say that, I didn't know where the line was going until I realized that 16 years just kind of slipped Garmadon by. And it's so depressing and so dismissive in such a great way. And a lot of Garmadon's lines like that are like that in the first third. And honestly, the scenes between Lloyd and Garmadon are like the breath of life that keeps you going through the movie's slower first third. There's one scene where, like, Lloyd confronts Garmadon, early on in a mech, and, like, they're basically in mech suits, and Lloyd is trying to have the typical, like, hero-villain exchange with Garmadon, but it's sabotaging him because nobody knows the Green Ninja's identity, since, you know, ninjas cover their faces. Not even Garmadon, but Lloyd knows who Garmadon is, so he's trying to, like, be profesh, in his own words. But, like, he, like, is struggling to keep it together because he's talking to his dad that he longs to connect with, even though his dad is a massive asshole. And, like, there's one scene where he's, like, Garmadon, like, basically throws a bomb at him. It's like a cartoon bomb. Lloyd is trying to catch it, but can't because he doesn't have a dad who taught him how to catch. So Garmadon makes fun of him for it. And he's like, "Lay off, I never had a dad who taught me how to, like, do this." And Garmadon's like, "Wow. That is so sad and pathetic." Not realizing that he's talking to his own son. And then he goes, "You know, I know how to catch." And Lloyd is like, "Really?" He's like, "Yup. And I've never taught anybody. Never, ever. That information is just sitting in my brain, taking up space. When I die, it'll die with me." It's so oblivious and and not, there's something, like, so depressing about him saying that so cheerfully that just works for me, like, that style of humor. like every other line he says is great. And yeah, so Justin Theroux, I found out that this is one thing that even people who don't like this movie have been praising about it. Remember when I said the guy who played Captain Underpants was the best part of Captain Underpants? Now it's Justin Theroux's turn. He absolutely steals the show. But let me get more into the humor of this movie, because there are a few points where it kind of sputters. There are some jokes that work. Anything Justin Theroux says. And there's also, like, a few other sight gags that are pretty good. But there are others where it seems too much like this movie is trying to ape the humor style of the first two movies. And I don't think this movie has the same writer as the first two movies. It definitely doesn't have the same director. And at times, I mentioned how they're trying, like, it seems like they're being self-conscious, and it seems like they're trying to do that kind of kooky, fast-paced humor that the other two movies do, but not every joke works. And there are some jokes that I just plain don't get. Like, there are jokes that didn't make me laugh, and then there are jokes that I was like, what? For instance, Wu introduces this ultimate weapon, which he warns Lloyd not to use because Lloyd isn't ready. When it's actually, he kind of says it in a poignant it's kind of a poignant line where he tells Lloyd that he's not ready. He says that in the wrong hands, this weapon could be catastrophic, and Lloyd is like, well, let me use the weapon. I could use it to beat Garmadon. And Wu says, no, your hands, as you are now, are the wrong hands. It's like, oh, shit. Spoilers. Lloyd ends up using the weapon anyway. That's what fucks everything up. But regardless, when Wu introduces the ultimate weapon, he's like, the ultimate weapon! And the words appear as text on the screen. And then it cuts to, like, this weird, like, footage of, like, live-action footage with, like, cartoon flames and, like, eyebrows. And it's, like, it's very meme reminiscent. Like, we're watching a meme on screen right now, and then it ends. And I was like, I don't get it. What was with all the flashing live action? Like this was a parody of a commercial. Like a parody of a parody of a commercial. Like, why the eyebrows? Why the, like, flame drawn in MS Paint with that flashy effect that you saw in, like, that weird movie from the weird half-hour movie from the early 2000s? Like, well, I don't get it. Like, when they had text on the screen in the first LEGO movie, it kind of added to the film's childlike charm, especially when the words that introduced a new world pop up in the background, like pop up in the foreground, and then a later shot you could see that they're still in the background and floating in the sky for no reason. In the LEGO Batman movie, it made sense also because that was parodying comic books and the Adam West TV show, which had, you know, the word balloons appear on the frame. Here, it seems like we just have words on the screen because it's kooky. And that's it. And I don't get it. I'm sorry, I just don't. And then they do that again later when they introduce a weapon even stronger than the ultimate weapon, the ultimate weapon, and then they play the same footage they played for the ultimate weapon, but like mirrored. Like, so like, it's like back to back, like splitting the screen vertically. Like, I don't get it. I'm sorry. Yeah, there are, okay, so some of the humor that's centered around the characters also doesn't work, and this is what I want to talk about. You notice that throughout a lot of this movie, I've been saying Lloyd and the ninja do this. Lloyd and the ninja fight Garmadon. Lloyd and the ninja are heroes. That's because and the ninja is kind of treated as one character. There are 5 other ninja besides Lloyd, and in the TV show, they all had distinct personalities and all had distinct arcs. This movie kind of treats them all as one entity. They all have their individual names and colors and elements, and they do sort of have individual personalities, but they're always treated as a unit. They all feel the same thing at the same time. They start off at the beginning of the movie liking Lloyd. Then Lloyd fucks up with the ultimate weapon. Then they don't like Lloyd. Then they like Lloyd again. Like, when they decide to rescue Lloyd, they all decide to do it at once. When they decide that they're angry at Lloyd, they all decide to do it at once, etc. And, like, it's kind of disappointing because I know that a lot of fans really love these characters. For me, what always interests me the most about the Ninjago story was, to its credit, what the movie chooses to focus on, which is the relationship between Lloyd and Garmadon. That was always what kept my interest, and Garmadon was always my favorite character, for a completely different reason than he's my favorite character in this film. But, yeah, it's weird to see the the other ninja be steamrolled so flatly. It's especially disappointing in the case of Zane, the ice ninja. And I'm about to talk some Ninjago lore, so try to keep up with me if you're not familiar with Ninjago. Basically, Zane's whole thing is that he is actually a robot who resembles a human being and has ice powers. Now, the show has been running for 8 seasons. Throughout most of the show's run, we've known that Zane was a robot. But when the show first started, we didn't know that. So there was an episode where Zane discovers his origin, who he is, and he discovers the blueprint of himself and opens up his front chest panel, which he never knew he had, and his friends all gasp, and he cries no to the sky. It's melodramatic, but it was also dramatic. It was something. This movie starts off with kind of everyone in the group, including Zane, knowing that he's a robot. And basically Zane's entire personality has been boiled down to, he's a robot, and it's obvious. He makes robot and dial-up sounds. He has this very heavy, echoey flang to his voice, a la Soundwave. It's not quite as heavy as Soundwave's, but it's like that. And every other line is him loudly proclaiming that he's not a robot, like Zim with being an alien, or not being an alien. He's like literally his first line is something like, "Hello, Lloyd. My mom was on my case yesterday, and I was all like, dial-up tone noise, right? I am a normal human boy." He keeps doing that throughout the movie. It's like, Zane, shut up. And what makes it especially obnoxious is that Zane had a really likable personality in the show. Zane in the show almost came across as an Asperger's metaphor. He's got all the symptoms. He doesn't quite understand social cues, including when he's being made fun of. He has no sense of humor and sits stoic face through the things his friends laugh about. At one point, he walked in on Jay when he was in the bathroom, not realizing that was something he's not supposed to do. He has a really formal speech pattern where he refuses to use contractions. And occasionally they'll catch him doing something that doesn't make sense. Like when he sees a falcon and communicates with it by wordlessly doing this. Or there's another episode where they all insult Zane and Zane runs off without saying a word to anyone, and they think it's because Zane is mad at them. But it turns out Zane was just following his falcon friend again, and he wasn't mad at them at all, and furthermore doesn't get why he would be. These are all charming characteristics, and Zane was personable and selfless and wanted to help his friends and be the best hero he could be, but he also was struggling just to fit in. And at first he had no idea why he was struggling to fit in. And it turns out it's not because he has a neurological condition that makes him perceive the world differently, but because he's not human. Kind of skeevy when you put it like that, but regardless, this Zane is just a one-note gag. And all the characters are like that. Kai is the fucking the fire ninja. He was the main character in the show. Now he's just kind of there, taking up space. His sister Nia, the fact that they're siblings is barely alluded to. They reference it, but it just seems to be a fact. Cole, okay, this is funny. When I saw this movie is, the theater I saw this movie in was a fancier theater. And so they actually had someone come up and announce the movie, they said, this is a Ninjago movie. And what she said was, it stars Jackie Chan, Dave Franco, who voices Lloyd, and Fred Armisen, who voices Cole. Those are the 3 starring roles she noted. And I'm like, starring Fred Armisen as Cole? Come on. Every time Cole was on screen, I was like, there he is, the star of the movie! What wonderful words will he grace us with? And usually it was a 2-word thing hey, dude. Yes! Genius! It's it would have been more fitting to just say that Justin Theroux stars this movie, since he's the protagonist. What the hell? So yeah, but Cole is in hip-hop. I don't get it. And he has actually a record turntable in his neck, and he spins the records to control it. I don't get it. I'm sorry, I don't. So basically the reason that the first act falls flat is because of that. And also there's just kind of this awkwardness that pervades it. Partly from the jokes that don't work, partly from, repeating the tropes and traits that we've seen in the previous LEGO movies. And Also because it's sort of repetitive in a really weird way. Okay, so first of all, Garmadon attacks one day. The ninja fight him off. Garmadon has an idea to come up with a big mech. Since the ninja have not been fighting like ninja, they've all been fighting only in their mechs. Like, they stay in their mechs the whole time. And at this point, I kind of knew where the plot was going, that at some point they were going to lose their mechs and they would have to learn to fight, like, with actual, like, ninja skills, like martial arts, the way they're supposed to. So in the scene where that happens, Garmadon comes back with a bigger mech, and literally they repeat the exact same sequence of shots twice. Like, they do the same thing. Like, they show the scene of the beach. They show the same characters doing the same things on the beach. The same song is playing on the radio. Garmadon comes up. Lloyd gives the same orders to the mechas to go where. And Lloyd even does that. Like, there's one shot where Lloyd, his mech is shaped like an Eastern-style dragon. And there's, like, the sequence where the dragon fires missiles out of every conceivable part of its body, and even some non-conceivable parts. Like, it fires missiles out of its toes and out of its side and out of its tail. Its head fires as a missile, then it grows as another head, which also fires as a missile. And, like, he's hitting them with, like, 50 missiles at once. And the first time the sequence is used, it's actually a pretty funny... it was actually the climax to a pretty funny and actually kind of emotional scene. Basically, Lloyd was convinced that... tried to convince himself that the reason Garmadon was invading on Lloyd's 16th birthday was that he's come back to see Lloyd. And that he wants to conquer the city because he wants to reconnect with Lloyd. But Garmadon kind of cock teases him by saying that the reason he wants to conquer Ninjago is because there's a guitar that he's particularly attached to that he traded to somebody who lives there. And then he says it's because there's a sushi place that he's particularly connected to. Anyway, so Lloyd gets so fed up with Garmadon's stupidity that he fires this missile barrage at him. However, when Garmadon attacks the second day with his new and improved mech, the exact same sequence plays again. Lloyd again fires 50 different missiles out of his mecha in the exact same order and with the exact same computer robotic voice sounding off each missile. It's like, oh my god, you're doing this again? Did you have to pad this out to 1:40? Did you absolutely have to? It was maddening. I kind of get the idea behind why they did it this way. It was to show, like, how the ninja's normal tactic isn't working, that they're relying too much on their weapons, and that, like, this day started off the same as every other day, but it changed but it doesn't work. Like, we're stuck looking at the exact same thing, and if you are going to repeat the day, which is fine because you're repeating it with a twist this time, but you can't spend this much time repeating it. One more thing I do want to mention story-wise before I move on is Lloyd lives with his mother. Now, Lloyd's mother was not a character until kind of the second season. In this movie, she's there from the beginning. And I want to bring this up because basically Lloyd is ostracized by everyone in the entire city. Like, it's not a secret that he's Garmadon's son, even though it is a secret that he's a green ninja, even though he wears green all the time. Like, everybody hates him for being the son of Garmadon, the guy who ruins everything. Nobody will sit next to him on the bus. The cheerleaders come up with a song deriding him that ends up on the radio. Like, that was awkward, too. And, like, Lloyd basically spends his daily life getting shit on by absolutely everyone. His mother tells him to believe in himself and, like, put forward the self that's inside of him. Like, the part of you that's in here, this is the part you should show them. And I know that they'll, like, believe in you and stuff. It's like, yeah, that's the part of you that I see. It's like, Coco, your son runs around dressed as a ninja fighting your ex-husband, right? You know this. She doesn't. So when she's talking about following the true him, like, there's a huge part of his life that she doesn't know about. And the movie never addresses this. Like, when you think with a disparity like that, the movie would say something about it. But they don't. And it's like a huge hole. Like, you actually don't know the real him because he pilots a dragon mech and you don't know that. But anyway, I'll talk about Coco more later. So I feel like I've criticized this movie a lot, and I'm not done yet. But the part where it gets good is basically starting at the second act. Let me go into detail now about what Lloyd does to fuck up. Basically, he activates the ultimate weapon. At first, we can't tell what it is, but I kind of already guessed what it is from the trailers. A lot of the trailers show a cat, like an actual like live action cat rampaging through Ninjago, destroying the city. And of course, to these minifigs, a cat is like several stories tall. It's a real monster to be dealt with. So I thought, oh, the ultimate weapon is a laser pointer, right? It turns out that's exactly what it is. And Lloyd, not knowing what it is, fires it at Garmadon. And Garmadon panics because apparently Garmadon was able to recognize the ultimate weapon, but didn't know what it did either. So he's like, oh my god, I'm exploding. Wait, what? That's it? But then the cat comes out of nowhere and begins to destroy Ninjago. And because of this, Garmadon is actually able to conquer Ninjago because he overwhelms Lloyd, gets the laser pointer from him, and starts pointing it at his friend's mechs. And this would be a serious scene if it wasn't sabotaged by, like, when he points it at Zane's mech and Zane's mech is destroyed. Zane, instead of actually screaming, says, prolonged scream in his robotic voice. It's like, Zane, oh my god, what did they do to you? But anyway, after this scene, this is what makes all his friends mad at him. So this is when Wu brings up the ultimate weapon. It says we have to cross like this wasteland of like this thick jungle with this haunted like graveyard, and there are all these snakes and scorpions, and nobody has ever survived, so we can go to this temple at the top of the mountain to retrieve the ultimate weapon. So we have to go and save Ninjago and do this. And I was thinking like, it's a little late in this movie to be having this is what we're going to do for the rest of the movie scene. Like, this was like maybe half an hour in. It's like, this scene seems like it should have come sooner. Like, Ninjago, like not Ninjago, that's the movie I'm talking about now. In Moana, early on, Grandma Tala tells Moana, like, someone will sail across the sea, find Maui and restore the heart of Te Fiti. Like, she introduces that's the goal of the movie early on. And most movies do that. Like, they say, like, we have to beat Tai Lung and save the valley. We have to escape the evil empire and get these droids back to the princess. They establish what we're supposed to do. Well, for the first third of this movie, we're following a story where these kids repel Garmadon every day, and it doesn't really have focus until they go on the journey. But once they go on the journey, the movie finds itself. Like, it actually gets into this groove that it was missing before. Basically, early on in their journey, led by their teacher, Sensei Wu, they're followed by Garmadon, who has kind of been threatened by Coco. Okay, he's not following them because Coco threatened him. He's following them because basically early on in the movie, Lloyd got so fed up with Garmadon that he blurted, I wish you weren't my dad, which is kind of cute the way Garmadon reacts to it. Garmadon has just discovered that his hated enemy, the Green Ninja, is his son Lloyd, which he didn't know. And then Lloyd says, I wish you weren't my son. And Garmadon's reaction is to be confused. Like, he's not like deeply hurt. He's not like, I can't believe he said that to me. He's like, what did he mean by that? And he treats it like this riddle, like, I wish you weren't my dad. What does he mean? And so he's partly following the ninja to find out exactly what Lloyd meant by, I wish you weren't my dad. And the first time I saw this movie, I've only seen this movie once, and it was earlier today. But when I saw that scene, I'm like, bitch, did he fucking stutter? He hates you because you're a terrible dad. You make fun of him at every turn. You've tried to kill him. You've conquered a city. You've forgotten he exists. You've forgotten that he's 16. You totally cock block him every time he thinks that you're coming back for him and that you care about him in the slightest bit. Like, when he says he wishes someone else was his dad, that's what he means. But anyway, I'll get to the payoff for that later. So basically, Garmadon catches up with him and he and Wu fight. And the fight scene is really well done. Like, and even the earlier fight scenes, even though those scenes were slower with the mechas, they were really exciting. Like, it could have been more exciting if the dialogue and pacing wasn't so awkward. Shut up, Carlo, I'm talking about Legos. But the way the mecha move was extraordinary when they're smashing through bridges and retrieving buses, and like fighting the force of evil. It's like all done in this really fast-paced way. And when it got to the fight scene between Garmadon and Wu, oh my god, how long is that going to go on? Jesus. Anyway, I'll keep talking. I could tell that Jackie Chan had done the choreography because it was, oh thank god it stopped. It was unbelievable. Like, occasionally it moved so fast that I couldn't quite tell what was going on, but I think that's just part of this art style because all three movies have had that problem. But like, Garmadon and Wu are flipping and kicking and punching, and they're using the terrain, and they're throwing things, and like the characters can barely follow it. And like, this actually leads to one of the jokes I really like. Wu is teaching them to be actual ninja now that they've lost their mechs, and he's like tells them, "Okay, everyone, blend into the shadows like ninja," and they're all just like very awkwardly just kind of stand very visibly behind things. And so when Garmadon first shows up, he's like, "Wu, I've got you all alone." And Wu is like, "No, I'm not alone. My ninja are here blending," and they're in the shadows waiting for the perfect chance to strike. And then Garmadon looks over and he sees all 6 of them just lined up, like clearly visible. Like one of them goes, "Caca!" It's so stupid. And like when Garmadon and Wu run past them, you can hear Nia say, "We are so hidden right now." And then when Garmadon says, "I guess we'll see you," she's like, "Oh man, really?" Just how hurt she sounded when he said that worked for me. So anyway, the fight's really exciting. But anyway, Garmadon beats Wu, and Wu goes over the bridge and lands in the river. As they can see that Wu's head is above the water as he floats away, but even so, they treat it like he's dead. Like, they're surprised when Wu shows up alive later. It's like, why? You saw that he was fine when he floated away. It just took him a while to get back to you. Not only that, but Wu makes it seem like he wanted them to think he was dead, which is weird, which means that this movie has 3 fake-outs with Wu's death. When Garmadon's army is attacking and they unleash Meowthra the cat, like the Destiny's Bounty, the ship that Wu lives on, sinks, and Lloyd thinks that Wu is dead before Wu pops up behind him. Then, in that scene where he falls in the river, like, Wu vanishes beneath the water, his hat appears alone bobbing on the surface, and then after they have a scene where they're like, "Oh my god," then Wu appears again. Then, after that, when he floats away, apparently they thought he died a 3rd time, but no, he's fine. It's like, Wu, stop it. But regardless, Wu, before he was beaten by Garmadon, managed to lock him in a cage. And so, basically, they have to make the trip with Garmadon instead of Wu, because they need someone to teach them ninjutsu, and they're not going to make it without some kind of ninjutsu master. So Lloyd, against his will, has to now drag his dad, who is an asshole, through the woods to get to the temple. And honestly, because Garmadon is, again, the best character in this movie, having him with them the whole time made the movie stronger. And what's more, we actually see this pretty natural progression as Garmadon and Lloyd, slowly start to get along, and Garmadon realizes what he's been missing out on by being absent from Lloyd's life. The scenes between Lloyd and Garmadon are the strongest in the movie. The earlier 2 scenes, this is partly due to not only Justin Theroux, but Dave Franco's really strong voice acting. And the scene where, the early scenes in the city where Lloyd confronts Garmadon's Green Ninja, and they have these exchanges where Lloyd knows that he's Garmadon's son, but Garmadon doesn't know that Lloyd, his son, is standing right in front of him. Dave sounds genuinely hurt as he rails at his dad for, like, basically abandoning him and being the worst guy ever. And like when they connect, it feels very warm and human and personable. Basically, what kicks it off is that Garmadon, who I love that they decided to bring Garmadon along with them, but weren't stupid enough to actually let him out of the cage that Wu locks him up with. So they have to carry him on their backs in that cage. Not only that, but Garmadon seems totally cool with that setup, and he's like chatting with the other ninja in a friendly tone as Lloyd rolls his eyes. It's kind of funny. But basically, Garmadon and Lloyd are both at the same time captured by, and this is kind of funny, by disgruntled former generals of Garmadon's. Garmadon has the habit that most evil overlords have of getting rid of his generals when they displease him, which is often. There's a pretty funny scene early on where he has like a business meeting with them where he berates them for failing to conquer Ninjago again, and every time someone says something stupid, he he blasts them out of a volcano and then promotes the next person in line to their position. And he like goes through like maybe 8 people by doing this. So now all of these generals, and there are way more than 8 in there, decide to throw Lloyd and Garmadon into the volcano. But this is the moment where Lloyd and Garmadon bond, because Garmadon has to now teach Lloyd to throw, because Lloyd and Garmadon have to throw things to the other ninja so they can build a thing, as a typical LEGO movies, to get them out of that situation. And it is kind of heavy-handed, but it's also kind of cute, especially in the scene afterward where Lloyd is like driving the ship that they built to try to fly them to the temple, and Garmadon is eager to teach him how to drive as well, until Lloyd reveals that he already knows how to drive, and like Garmadon looks put out. But then Lloyd decides to play along with it anyway by asking his dad, like, so 10 and 2, right? And Garmadon immediately jumps up. He's like, yes, and be sure to check your rearview mirrors. He's like, yep, mirrors, got it. Like, he's like humoring his dad and letting him teach something that he already knows just to make him smile, and it was cute, okay? So you're probably wondering how Garmadon goes from not giving a shit about his son to actively being depressed when he doesn't get the chance to teach him how to drive. Honestly, the film doesn't completely answer that. The show offers an explanation, but not the film. This is where it kind of helps to be a Ninjago fan before you reach this. And I'm also going to talk about Garmadon's character a little bit. Garmadon was my favorite character in the show, but for a completely different reason that Garmadon is my favorite character here. Garmadon in the show was a very tragic character. Basically, Garmadon does not want to be evil, but he is compelled to, because when he was a kid, he was bitten by an eldritch abomination called the Great Devourer, which is basically a snake that, among its other powers, has literal evil in its venom. So if it bites someone, they become evil whether they want to or not, and they are like compelled to do wicked things and think wicked thoughts, and they cannot help themselves. Garmadon was bitten when he was like maybe 10. He was just a kid, and the evil got worse and worse and harder to control as he got older, until he became a world-conquering monster. So Garmadon doesn't do bad because he's actually wants to, but because he's compelled to. And it's revealed at the tail end of season 2, in a pretty heart-wrenching scene for a Saturday morning cartoon, that the reason Garmadon wants to conquer the world and twist everything to be evil is so that his family won't be repulsed by him anymore. He's thinking that if his wife and son are as evil as he is, then they will want to be with, like, they can all be together again. And that's heavy shit. And the movie doesn't reference this. Okay, the movie doesn't have this backstory, but it does reference it. In the scene where the ninja are carrying Garmadon through the forest, Garmadon, the question of, Garmadon, why do you have 4 arms, comes up, and Garmadon answers that he was bit by a snake. And that's the only reference that we get to the Great Devourer backstory. And when I heard that, my ears kind of perked up, because I'm like, wait, are they actually going to talk about that? They don't. But the way Garmadon talks about it is like, Jay points out that snakes don't have arms. So Garmadon says, the snake was bitten by a spider, and then it bit me. And that's supposed to explain why he looks like a black abomination and had 4 arms. Black meaning like, not African American, because there's no such thing as a abomination in that context, but like his skin is actually like charred and fried looking, and like literally black, like night, like not black like a normal person's skin is, but black like a freakish, like, okay, this is getting awkward. Basically, he looks like a 4-armed monster, and he says it's because he got bit by a snake that got bit by a spider. And when Lloyd points out that doesn't make any sense, Garmadon's like blows him off like, I'd like to see you come up with something that makes better sense. Which makes it seem like Garmadon is like avoiding the question. So like maybe the Great Devourer is a thing in this continuity. I don't know. But basically, when you see these scenes about Garmadon going back and forth between caring about his son, not giving a shit about him, or wanting him to conquer Ninjago with him, and where he's lamenting that he can't give up being evil to just be the dad that he does long to be, it kind of makes sense with that explanation from the show that he's being compelled to be evil by something that he can't control. It almost reminded me of the Ice King when I heard that story about how his mind too is being warped by supernatural forces, and it's sabotaging his relationships with the people he loves. So that character trait makes sense for a fan, but I'm worried that people who aren't familiar with the show like will be frustrated and confused by Garmadon's side switching. There are a few moments that reference lore from the show. One moment that made me kind of chuckle is when Garmadon, Lloyd's father, calls Lloyd at the beginning. Lloyd's phone rings, and you hear that his ringtone is actually The Weekend Whip, which is the theme song from the show. Yeah, the show's theme song is his ringtone. And, like, maybe you'd expect in a movie like this for him to be like, oh, what a catchy tune when he hears it. But no, his phone just rings and he answers it like, hello? And I thought that was cool. Weirdly enough, I chuckled, but neither of the kids who were in the theater reacted at all. Like, maybe they stopped using that as the theme at some point, but I caught it. There's another scene later that I liked, where basically in the Ninjago TV series, the ninja fight using a fight style they call spinjitzu, which is basically spinning around like the Tasmanian devil. And that's all it is. Like, they just turn into tornadoes corresponding to the color that they are, and they spin. And it's stupid. And I like the actual martial arts that this movie has a lot better. And there's a scene in this movie where Wu tells them, practice spinjitzu. And their response is to, like, kind of spin around awkwardly while holding their arms out. It's like... It seems like they're making fun of spinjitzu in a way that's okay to me, because I never liked spinjitzu that much. There's another thing when they're talking to Garmadon, and Garmadon lets drop that he's actually over 170. Yeah, he and Wu are both over, like, Wu is like 164 or something like that. So both of them are approaching 200 years. And when Wu said earlier to Lloyd that he was super, super old, he wasn't fucking kidding. Oh, I haven't mentioned this yet, but Wu and Garmadon are brothers. And Garmadon is totally immature about it, by the way. Saying that Wu's beard is stinky and gross, and he sends his generals to read a note to Wu that basically calls him a butthead in a bunch of words. It's kind of funny. It's childish, but it's funny. So basically, I feel like this hand wave kind of references a thing from the show that a lot of people have debated about for years, is that Wu is supposed to be Lloyd's uncle. He looks like he's in his 70s. When we first meet Lloyd in the show, he's like 10. So he doesn't look like, maybe it's possible, but Misako, Lloyd's mother in the show, looks like she's in her 60s, maybe her 50s, like at the youngest. Like, she's got like gray hair and wrinkles. She looks too old to be the mother of a 10-year-old. And when Garmadon is, spoiler alert, at the end of season 2, purged of his evil and becomes human again, he too looks way too old to be a 10-year-old kid's parent. It's like, what happened? Like, did you have kids really late, or did being married to Garmadon really age you? This movie, actually references, no, we're actually over, a good amount of time, over a century old. Which, makes his relationship with Coco a sort of May-December romance, because Coco, is maybe in her 40s, but she looks like she could be younger. So, at the least, there was a 130-year difference between him and Coco. It's like, oh, wow. So I'm going to get into spoilery stuff now, because I feel like I have to talk about spoiler stuff to talk about why I like this movie so much. So basically, the group finally arrive after Lloyd and his dad have become a lot closer at the big scary temple that Wu has told them to go to, where the ultimate weapon is kept. And it turns out that this big, tall temple at the top of this mountain that shakes and wobbles a lot is actually the house where Wu and Garmadon grew up. This is their family home. And, the key is still under the mat and everything. I have so many questions about this. Why did Garmadon and Wu grow up in a super scary temple? It doesn't look like the dojo where they grew up in the show. Why do Garmadon and Wu live for, over, almost 200 years? Will Lloyd live that long? Will he outlive all his friends and his mother? That's a depressing thought. In the show, there was a backstory where Lloyd's grandfather, Garmadon and Wu's father, is actually the first Spinjitzu master who actually created the continent of Ninjago out of nothing using his elemental powers, because he mastered the element of creation. I'm not sure if that's the case in the movie, since the family photos we see on the wall of the Garmadons, like, the figure who's supposed to be the dad clearly does not look like the first Spinjitzu master from the show. But what's interesting is that it does depict Garmadon as a baby, and he looks like a human. Like, he looks like he could be the baby version of his human self from the show. Like, he's got the dark brown hair and the normal skin, so it's like, yeah, the Great Devourer thing might be the case in this movie, but we never get a definitive answer on that. This review is running long. Sorry. So basically, it is here that Garmadon tells Lloyd the backstory of how he and Coco met. And it's actually a pretty emotional moment, helped a lot by the score, and again by Justin Theroux's voice acting. Basically, Coco was herself a ninja in a moment that was pretty clumsily foreshadowed early on in the movie, where Nia reveals that she's got a decal of this certain ninja on her bike, and it's someone she really admires. It's one line, and you might think it's a throwaway, but it's actually Lloyd's mother, which none of them knew. And I guess there was a bit of irony here where Lloyd's mother didn't know that her son was a ninja, or he didn't know that she was a ninja. But again, the movie never actually does anything with that disparity. But anyway, Garmadon and Coco, it turns out, met on the battlefield on opposite sides, but they noticed each other's fighting style and became attracted to each other because of the ferocity they saw on the field. They fought one-on-one, and in the moment their eyes and blades locked, they fell in love, in an obvious joke, at first fight. Love at first fight. That's the actual line from the movie. And they lived happily together until Lloyd was born, and Garmadon decided he wanted to conquer Ninjago so that he could lay the foundation for Lloyd's future. Basically conquer it so he could set up like the perfect like palace or whatever for his family. But Coco realized she didn't want Lloyd to grow up that way, so took Lloyd and went into Ninjago without Garmadon. And it's like this really sad moment where Garmadon says, I shouldn't have let her take you. Like, I shouldn't have let her leave, or like something like that. It's like, oh my god. And it's all this time, like, and like Garmadon is still driven to conquer Ninjago in spite of Lloyd, which makes him realize that he can't change. And there's these scenes from the trailer, like there's a scene from the trailer where Lloyd like awkwardly asks Coco, like, so, like, tell me about you and Dad, like, how'd you meet? And Coco like tells him the story that like where we see Garmadon like dressed in a tie and like dress shirt and like with a blonde wig that so doesn't go with like his monstrous appearance, where he like met Coco and like they went on like a motorcycle through the desert, and like they went to work at the same place, and like they're eating at like this cafe and they're holding hands, and it's like a very like parody like scene, like, yeah, I met this guy and I didn't know he was an evil overlord. He like talked about how he wanted to conquer the world, and I thought it was just a metaphor. In the trailer itself, it seems like that Coco was lying when she tells that story, but it turns out in the film, it's actually worse than that. Lloyd at no point asked Coco how he met Garmadon. Instead, the scenes that we see of Garmadon trying to be normal, holding hands with Coco, having romantic dates with her, those are an imagined spot by Garmadon when he says, I could have changed, but I didn't. So those are basically just Garmadon imagining him being able to abandon his evil ways and live a normal life with Coco as a husband, and he cannot do it. And like, so it wasn't just like a overly false cheery parody. Instead, it becomes a tragic dream, which is even more tragic because of his ridiculousness. You expect this fanged monster to just go through normal life as a husband and father. Like, he can't do that. He knows he can't do that. As another movie that I liked, a lot of people didn't, earlier this year said, like, there is nowhere in the world a beast can go. Like, it's really sad. In that moment, Garmadon says that he can be with Lloyd now, and Lloyd gets all excited until Garmadon reveals that he means he wants he and Lloyd to conquer Ninjago together, because even after all he's been through with Lloyd, he still can't give up that part of him. Great Devourer. And Lloyd tells him, I'm sorry, Dad, I can't, but you said it yourself. We don't have to fight each other anymore because you don't have to fight anymore. And they both are pulling each other the alternate ways. So Garmadon decides to run off with the ultimate weapon, and the ninja try to stop him from taking it for himself. And honestly, I like the way that scene is played because it isn't played like a betrayal. It's played more like somebody who's relapsed. Like, Lloyd isn't like, Dad, how could you do this to me? He's like, it sounds more like he's trying to talk his father down. Like, Dad, it's okay. You don't have to do it. Dad, just give it to me. Dad! But, like, Garmadon's not listening. And, like, there's one point where, like, one of the other ninja get the chest containing the ultimate weapon. They try to throw it to Lloyd, but Lloyd, of course, cannot catch it because his father never taught him that. Garmadon grabs the chest for himself and says sadly, I should have taught you how to catch. And then he leaves. And that line, even though it's silly in the way that works for poignant LEGO moments because it's kind of like Garmadon admitting that he wanted Lloyd to stop him, but Lloyd couldn't do it. So it's sad, okay? But let me get into kind of the other plot structure things that this movie does set up well. Basically, the ultimate weapon is revealed to be I thought it was going to be some other cat-related thing, but it's kind of a fake out in that it turns out it's not. It's actually Lego pieces. It's one large green piece, and there's like separate other pieces for the other 5 elements. So like there's one for fire, one for water, one for earth, etc. And so they think they plug these things into the ultimate weapon and use it. But it turns out that's not actually what it's for. In fact, we never see the weapon like that because Lloyd determines that actually the power is inside them all along. I know it's cliche, but the way they phrase it sort of works when Wu tells them like to find your inner peace, and Lloyd like inner peace, like you think it's like Kung Fu Panda, like find the peace inside yourself, but it turns out it's actually a pun with the other meaning of peace because like Lloyd looks around at his friends and sees that like he imagines like each of the corresponding pieces he found in their place and he's like, oh my god, we could just use the power. And the reason this works, even though it's a little clumsy, like why did Wu send them on this long dangerous journey when they didn't fucking need it, the reason it works is because the show was that Lloyd had the elemental powers of everyone. In this version, Lloyd doesn't have an elemental power. His power is being able to bring out the powers in others. And at first he thinks that's lame. Because like Wu is telling everyone what their element is, and he's like, your element is green. And he's like, it's not an element. Can't I be wind? Wind's not taken. And he's like, no, you can't be wind. Can I be surprise? No, that's taken too. But he discovers that like green is life, and it's from where all creation comes, and all their powers spring from his influence, and that comes through his leadership style, where he's able to get people to believe in themselves. The other ninja were motivated to save him and Garmadon, and thus were able to use their skills well. The ninja all were able to find their powers with Lloyd's explicit encouragement. And it works. I feel like it really works. I feel like it's better than Lloyd having all their powers combined because it makes Lloyd a vital member of the team. Everybody else would be useless if not for Lloyd. And it's actually foreshadowed early on in an early scene where like Wu is like teaching them, like he's sort of taking them through a training, like Tai Chi exercise in the forest, and he's like, he says something about like feeling this lush green all around you, and it like kind of like foreshadows this revelation that like green is life and is the source of all things. It's like I thought it worked really well, and it kind of made up for this the peace pun. So basically, Garmadon tries to use the ultimate weapon himself against Meowthra, but gets eaten. So yeah, Garmadon gets eaten by a cat in this movie. It's weird. But then after they the ninja use their powers to fight their way through to Meowthra, through Garmadon's army, which is still occupying the city and is trying to stop them. Lloyd actually walks up to the cat and, in a true pacifist moment, just like beckons it down, like, here, kitty, 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 come here. And he starts petting the cat slowly. And it turns out the cat is not a monster. Spoilers, the cat is just a cat. Just like the spoiler from the first movie. The villain of the movie all along was the villain of the movie. Here it's the cat was a cat all along. My God. So like Lloyd is petting the cat and saying, it's okay. It's okay. Everyone treats you like a monster, but I know you're just scared and alone. And like at first he's talking to the cat, but Garmadon can hear him from inside the cat. So at first it seems like Lloyd is talking to the cat, but then it becomes more and more explicit as he goes on that he's actually talking to his dad. And like when he says, Dad, he doesn't say dad, he's like, and I'm sorry I said earlier that I wish you weren't my dad, because I didn't mean it. What I really meant was that I wish you'd been there. And again, this scene works because of Dave Franco's voice acting. And it also sheds the earlier scene where Garmadon's like, what did he mean in a new light? Because Lloyd did not mean that he wished Garmadon wasn't his dad. He actually meant something else. And, like, Garmadon was right. He wasn't just being an idiot. He's actually more of a parent than he realizes. And that, like, every parent reaches the moment where their kid tells them that they hate them for the first time. Finding Nemo portrayed that moment pretty poignantly. And I love so much, it's really cute and sweet how in this movie, Garmadon's like, what did he mean by that? Instead of, like, being super hurt. Like, he is kind of hurt, but he's mostly confused and, like, trying to puzzle. It's like a riddle he's trying to puzzle out. And when Lloyd hands him the answer, Garmadon cries, and it turns out Garmadon's tears are pure fire, which is a scene that was foreshadowed in the flashback earlier. And as he cries these hot drops in the inside of a cat, ouch, the cat coughs him up. Yay. So, like, that scene where Lloyd is talking to the cat, talking to his dad through the cat, and it sounds like he's crying. I didn't cry, but I was close. And any movie that could get me that emotional definitely deserves praise. It's just, it seems like the plot didn't always tie in well together, but the themes definitely did. The theme of green, the theme of bringing out people's potential, and, like, the themes of, like, you know, feeling ostracized by the world, but actually wanting to connect, but you feel like your own identity and fate and circumstances won't let you. Like, this is a deep film. Like, I think it is. And a lot of people, I feel like, could identify with Lloyd of either having a shitty parent or wanting to reconnect better with a parent. It gets a little clumsy where Lloyd then apologizes to his mother for taking her for granted, but that didn't seem like it was as much of an issue. Like, there is one scene where Coco, like, gets out a cake for Lloyd, but Lloyd already says he's tired and goes to bed without her actually getting to give him the cake. So it's a little sad, but, like, the movie treated it as more of, like, a pressing issue than it was, because it seemed like Lloyd and his mother had a great relationship. Like, Lloyd comes home late because he was, like, talking to Wu and training. He was busy with Garmadon and everything. And so, like, it turns out his mother has been systematically calling every other mom in school, none of whom want their kids to hang out with Lloyd, by the way, asking them where Lloyd is. And when Lloyd comes back through the door, she's like, Lloyd, I was so worried. And they hug, and Lloyd reassures her, like, I'm okay, Mom. I didn't mean to scare you. Like, it seemed like a touching mother-son moment. And so, like, this idea that, like, their relationship wasn't that great, it seemed a little forced, but whatever. For the most part, the movie was really emotionally strong. Like, it felt very strong to me. And I want to emphasize again how fucking awesome the animation is in these LEGO movies. Like, it just gets better with every film, especially with Garmadon's movement. Like, not only is his character the best and his voice actor the best, his movement is the best too. Like, this is a minifig with 4 arms. You know, in real life, if you tried to move this thing half an inch, it would snap in half. Like, the slightest movement would make it fall over. But they really get, like, all this fluid motion with his 4 arms. There's a few creepy moments where he, like, actually crawls on the ground like a 6-limbed, like insectoid thing, and his shoulders are hunched up, and it looks freaky and, like, serpentine, like, like, doing that with the Legos, like, you have to cheat that, because Legos can't bend like that in real life, but it looked really fluid and great. Yes, I love that movement. I love the animation. I love the action scenes. And the scenes, like, when the ninja are fighting with their actual elements, they look so cool. Like, they're shooting fire, and Cole, like, blocks rubble flying with, like, he holds up his hands like this, and then boom, there's a huge shockwave, and Jay, like, sends out lightning. They look so cool. I kind of wish they'd gotten the power sooner in the film. Like, shit, this is the Lego Avatar that we never thought would... Like, this is closer to what the Avatar film should have been than the fucking Last Airbender was. Like, oh my god, it's so cool. The one last thing I do want to talk about, there are, like, a few other things I could talk about this movie, but this review is already really long. So one last thing I do want to talk about that's kind of a flaw is Wu's character. And this is one of the things I feel like they're like looking back at the LEGO movie and taking elements from that. Wu's character is supposed to be sort of a parody of Vitruvius. Now, the original Wu was a character who debuted before Vitruvius did. The LEGO Movie came out in 2014. The Ninjago show came out in 2011. But it seems like they're going away from Paul Dobson's portrayal of the character, instead going into Vitruvius 2.0. Except Vitruvius was the kooky mentor, but Wu is so kooky at times that it's hard to believe there's a sentient mind underneath there. He sends them on this asinine quest for pieces they do not need because the power's inside them all along. Inner peace. And, like, there's one scene where, like, he tells them to practice spin jutsu for 7 hours, and then he throws this book he wrote at them. He's, like, constantly saying weird things and making off-putting remarks. And, like, when he pops out of nowhere because he, like, when he pops out of nowhere, it's when they're escaping the temple. Kai is supposed to try to shoot a bit of falling rubble with his fireball, but he ended up engulfing it in flames, so it nearly kills them. So Wu has to save them from that, and they're like, Wu, you're alive! And he's like, of course, I thought being dead would teach you a lesson. It's like, pretending to be dead would help you learn. It's like, Wu, go to hell. So yeah, Wu seems like he's too kooky at times, and a lot of his teaching didn't make sense, but luckily a lot of the film they spent with Garmadon, who is a character who mostly makes sense. What makes this movie weird is that a lot of the things in it make more sense if you've seen the show, but if you've seen the show, then you can't help but notice the differences that it has with the movie. So you'll notice that Zane's personality's been wiped away. You'll notice that it focuses more on Lloyd instead of the other ninja. You'll notice that they sort of reference Garmadon's backstory, but never explicitly bring it up, and that Lloyd's mother is now a different woman, and like all this other stuff. But honestly, I still think it's a really good movie, and I do want to talk about one other thing. Some of the review, I saw one comment on TV Tropes that said this movie has been panned for not being as mature as the LEGO Movie or Batman movie were. LEGO Movie, I could see the maturity. I myself really identified with Emmett, especially in that scene where like they're interviewing people about him. It turns out people like barely remember him, if they do at all, and can't remember like anything notable about him. That hit really close to home for me. It brought up memories of middle school when I was like, you know, I had the exact same fears Emmett was. I felt like I was always in the corner and like nobody would care if I wasn't there. Or like I didn't have any friends who lasted, like, you know, that kind of thing. And the fact that the movie deals with that inadequacy seemed very grown up to me, and it had a plot twist that just blew my mind. But when they say that the Batman movie is mature, the Batman movie seemed like a very, very child-friendly movie when I saw it. Like, I like the Batman movie a lot, but the thing I remember thinking the most strongly when I saw the Batman movie was, wow, if I saw this when I was 10, I would fucking love this movie. I would think it was the coolest thing ever. Are you kidding me? Voldemort fighting with the Velociraptors and agents from the Matrix, and like Sauron's like beams inside, like, and the Daleks come out of the sky and they shoot them, like, and there's all these villains at once, and like the 10-year-old me wouldn't have known what a Dalek was, but basically seeing that movie felt like going to Universal Studios. It was a very kid-friendly ride. So saying that it was more mature was weird. Like, remember when Batman started beatboxing when Alfred's trying to talk to him? That was super mature, fantastic. And then it hit me why people are saying that. Batman is a property that's been around for decades, like close to a century. So a lot of the adults get the humor in Batman because it references things that they grew up with. Ninjago is doing the same thing, but it's with a property that adults don't know. In fact, I didn't even grow up with Ninjago. I'm too old to have grown up with Ninjago. So, like, the reason this is just a theory, and it might be wrong, but the reason people are saying the Batman Lego movie is more mature is because it references something the adults know. But it does so in the same way as Ninjago. Like, Ninjago is too engrossing you in a lore, but it's a lore that's been around for, like, 6 years instead of the decades of history. Like in the scenes where, like in the Lego Batman movie, where they're cycling through all the previous Batman films and like referencing other insane things that happen in different films, like when the Joker showed up to Prince music or whatever. When Ninjago doesn't have that rich storied history to work with, it's not less mature, it's just younger. And that's all it is to it. It reminds me as a kid, like when I was a kid, I remember the adults treated Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh!, which were the two big crazes I remember from my childhood, with either confusion or contempt. Adults didn't get those properties. They didn't want to get those properties. And I remember my mother recounting how she was begging to be shot in the head when she saw Pokemon 2000 in theaters. But to us, seeing them as kids, those movies seem really deep and profound and emotional, and we still love them to this day. That's what Batman is to our parents. Even though it's stupid, a lot of it makes no sense, especially the Adam West show, because they grew up with it, they love it, and the movie is treated as more mature arbitrarily because it's their childhood memories and not ours. Do you see what's happening here? Like, I feel like that's unfair. I feel like there's a lot of legit criticisms you could have in this movie. Not every joke works. The first act is clumsy and slow. And it feels like a lot of the characters from the show are sidearmed. But in terms of not being as mature or not as deep, this movie almost made me cry because of how mature and deep it was. So I don't think that criticism is valid. I think that shows some maybe favoritism in favor of Batman. Understandable. But still, you gotta understand that, like, this is important to people too. Like, Ninjago is important to people. And I thought this movie did a great job with its themes and with its action. Could have done a slightly better job. It could have done, well, not slightly, it could have done a better job with its story. But I thought it was really good. I love this movie. So I haven't even told you about a lot of the cool bits of action, references, or gags that I thought were really funny. It's basically what you've come to expect from a Lego movie, and maybe that's why people are decrying it, because the previous two Lego movies brought something new, and this one seems to be giving the same thing. And it's good stuff that it's giving, but it's giving we've seen before. And I think people are eager to latch on and attack this because it's commercial, and probably because they're still smarting from the Emoji movie, like, oh my god, they're being so commercial. But regardless, hopefully, you've seen enough of this review to decide whether or not you want to see this movie yourself. Personally, I recommend it. If you can get past the first act, there's some really good and even heart-wrenching stuff later on, so definitely stick around for that. I have talked a lot, but I think I'm ready to jump back, kick back, whip around, and maybe spin. I hope I said that right, or else that reference won't really work. This is Drag Huber 96600 signing off.